Good evening. My name is Sanjeev Joshipura, and I'm speaking with you today from Fairfax, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. Thank you so much for joining this program and spending your Saturday evening with us. We recognize that there's many other things you could have done with your time, but the fact that you're here today, right now, just indicates your passion, our shared passion for this race, and to ensure that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are sworn in as the next president and vice president of the United States. So delighted to have you all here. Indians for Biden is a volunteer grassroots group that was formed about 7 weeks ago in order to really galvanize and mobilize the Indian American community across all age ranges, all states, gender, whatever, to really vote for the Biden-Harris ticket and to ensure that all Indian Americans understand that the Biden-Harris ticket is great for the Indian diaspora here in America and also would be fantastic for the US-India relationship. There have been some myths that have been going around, and some of you might have heard them or heard of them, that for some reason, Trump and Pence would be better for US-India or Indian Americans. And we are here to dispel those notions in their entirety because that is absolutely not true. And we have concrete proof of that or evidence for that. And you can just refer to the platform that has been publicly released by the Biden campaign to understand the detailed thought that the campaign has given to the Indian diaspora and Indian American voters and the US-India relationship. And I'm sure if you read that, you will come away enthused with a very, very positive impression of what a Biden-Harris ticket can do for Indian Americans and US-India. But let's just speak of today, because today I'm really, really excited to be part of this event and to introduce it to you. We have an outstanding panel, and we are so delighted and honored that these state legislators will be spending the next hour with us. State legislators sometimes don't make the national headlines, but what they do is so, so vitally important for each and every one of us. I mean, you all know that they control things that are part of day-to-day life in so many different ways that are so near and dear to our hearts on a daily basis. And in fact, they also have tremendous sway at a national level based on the work that state legislatures do for things like redistricting and so on and so forth. And we're just delighted to have these four panelists. I'm not going to introduce them because I'm going to leave that to my colleague at Indians for Biden National Council. She's the Deputy Director of the Council, Mansi Patel. And with that, why don't I just turn it over to you, Mansi, without further ado, to introduce yourself and the panel and this event. Thank you so much again, all of you, for joining. Delighted to have you.
Oh, thank you, Sanjeev. Yes, we're really excited that all of you are taking time out of your busy schedules to join us this evening. As I was mentioning earlier, there's all of these state legislators have achieved so many different firsts, whether they're the first of their faith or the first Indian American to serve. And thank you all for joining us. To begin, just going to go in alphabetical order. We have Senator Jay Chaudhuri from North Carolina. He is the state Senate Democratic Whip and the second highest ranking member in the Senate Democratic Caucus. He is the first Indian American ever elected to the North Carolina General Assembly. He has served as special counsel to Attorney General Roy Cooper, where he helped lead an investigation by all 50 attorney generals that resulted in a landmark agreement with two leading social networking sites, MySpace and Facebook, to better protect children from internet predators. He has also worked on recruiting Indian companies to our region, getting Diwali recognized at the state and local levels, protecting and educating our committee on hate crimes, and much more. So we are thrilled that he is taking time to be with us tonight. Senator Manka Dhingra from Washington serves in the 45th Legislative District, which covers Seattle's East Side and King County. She was elected in 2017 in a special election, and she's the first person of Sikh faith elected to any state legislator in the US. Her priorities are to address the deficits in education funding, mental health, violence prevention, and to protect the rights of women. Senior Deputy Prosecuting Attorney with the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, and is chair of the Therapeutic Alternative unit, Senator Dhingra has helped develop and oversee the Regional Mental Health Court, the Veterans Court, and other programs. And prior to being elected, she was co-founder of Chaya, which many of you may have heard of, an organization that assists South Asian survivors of domestic violence. She also serves on the board of the National Alliance on Mental Illness East Side. Senator Ghazala Hashmi of Virginia has been serving since 2020. She represents Virginia's 10th district and is the first Muslim woman elected to Virginia State Senate. For the past 30 years, she served as a college educator, and for the past 2 decades, she's worked as a professor administrator within Virginia's community college system. She also holds a PhD in English from Emory University. She's the founding director of the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning at J. Sargent Reynolds Community College. She's understandably passionate about education and making sure that students, faculty, and staff have the resources and support they need to excel. And she immigrated from India with her parents when she was 4 years old, and last year actually marked her 50th anniversary of living in the US. And last but not least, we have Representative Padma Kuppa from Michigan. She represents Michigan's 41st House District, which encompasses the cities of Troy and Clawson. She currently serves as the Assistant Minority Whip for the House Democrats, and she is the first Indian immigrant and Hindu in the Michigan State Legislature, and her campaign was just endorsed by President Obama a few days ago. She moved to her district more than 20 years ago. She has worked as an engineer and project manager with a career that spanned automotive, financial, IT industries. She's been a civic leader, founding the Troy Area Interfaith Group to bring people of different faiths together. And she served on Troy's Planning Commission. She's currently president of the Troy Historical Society and a board member of the Michigan Roundtable for Diversity and Inclusion. And there's so much more that we could say about these, but hopefully this was a very broad introduction to them. And I guess we wanted to really begin with asking each of you about a little bit about your personal journey in public service. You've all done so much. What really motivated you to become a voice to represent others in politics? Starting with Senator Chaudhuri, and then please go ahead.
Yeah, first, thank you, Mansi, and thank you, Sanjeev, for organizing this event. And I have to say that I am super thrilled and excited to be with 3 other incredible state legislators, all women, of course. And I'm very thankful to Sanjeev's point that you've highlighted the electeds at state legislative level, because I think part of what I hope we take away from tonight is really the importance of what happens at the state level. I think oftentimes as a community, we tend to focus on issues around foreign policy. We tend to focus on people who are running for Congress. But I think, as Sanjeev mentioned, at the end of the day, it's really the decisions that are made in state capitals that arguably impact people's lives in the Indian American community more than anyone else. And to answer your question, I've been in public service in some form or fashion to the state of North Carolina my entire career. As you mentioned, I've worked as a senior counsel both to then Attorney General Roy Cooper, who now serves as our governor. I've also served as a general counsel to our state treasurer that manages the pension fund here in North Carolina. But I've also served as a legislative counsel as well to our current governor when he was actually a state senator, and I actually also clerked at the Court of Appeals. And so before I ever ran for the North Carolina State Senate, I served at the highest levels of all 3 branches of government here in North Carolina. And the reason that I did so is because as son of immigrants, because my parents who came to this country more than 50 years ago and came to North Carolina almost 50 years ago, one thing that they instilled in me is a great deep love for this country, but also a deep love for the state of North Carolina. And when I think about where that deep love comes from, it really comes from progressive leadership that we've had in the state of North Carolina that said that it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, or brown. It doesn't matter whether you're a second generation North Carolinian or 11th generation North Carolinian. It doesn't matter whether you're in business or academics or working in government, but we work best when we work together and not apart. And in North Carolina, as we'll hear about, I mean, we are a battleground state. There was an article in the New York Times earlier this week that said that the White House, the Supreme Court, and the U.S. Senate all hinges on North Carolina. And so we see a lot of visits by presidential and vice presidential candidates. But one of the things that I would say is that it's also important to focus at what's happening at the state legislative levels, because we can take a bottom-up approach. And so the reason that I ran for the North Carolina State Senate was really to give back to the state as much because of what the state has given to my parents. And it's also important for me personally to make sure that there's progressive values, that this state was known. We are known as kind of as a progressive beacon in the South, that we can restore that. This year, we are very close to flipping the North Carolina State Senate. We only need to pick up 5 more state Senate seats to have a Democratic majority in the state Senate. And as my colleague to the north of me, we are looking to follow in the footsteps of Virginia and the great work that Senator Hashmi has done. So,
wonderful. That's good. That's good to know. And it sounds like you have, it was a lot of your prior experience which informed your decision to run. So that's great to hear. Senator Dhingra, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And it is just such a pleasure to be here with these amazing leaders. You know, I love this question. And the reason why I do is because people assume you have to have this long history of working in politics in order to run for office. And I'll tell you that even though I have an undergraduate degree in political science, I was never politically engaged until our national election in 2016. I always considered myself a good Democrat. I voted. And that was the extent of that. I was happy living my life as a senior deputy prosecuting attorney, you know, with husband, kids, doing what we all do. And what changed for me was a national election in 2016. I was actually hosting a very large election night party. And the reason why I was hosting such a large election day party, which I've never done before, goes back to actually when Obama was elected. I was so excited when he got elected, and our newspaper at that time had done this amazing front cover of all the photos of all the presidents. And I remember like laying it out on my table and calling my kids over and saying, hey, come and take a look at all the faces of our presidents. And my 3-year-old daughter comes running in and she goes, where's the page with the women presidents? And so I had a really large election night party in 2016 because I wanted to show my now teenager the face of our first female president in America. Obviously, that didn't happen. And, you know, it really made me think long and hard about what I had been doing with my life and what I wanted to do for the future. So I actually went to my first Democratic Party meeting that December. And I announced that I was running for the Senate in February. And, you know, one of the things that really motivated me is we bring up our kids with certain values, right? I expect my children to show respect for individuals. I've spent my career working to help survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault. I'm a prosecutor in this county where, you know, I've put sexual predators behind bars. And I work with mentally ill involved individuals in the criminal justice system. So to see that everything that I have stood for and fought for kind of just go away with the election of Trump really made me feel like I couldn't sit on the sidelines anymore. I had to make sure that I was doing something that helped my children and the next generation have the values that I want them to have. Starting with just honesty, humility, respect. And so I decided to run. At that time, I didn't necessarily understand that my seat was the seat that flipped majority control in the state of Washington. This was the first election after a national election. So my race ended up being the most expensive Senate race in the state of Washington, which really tells me we need to do a lot in terms of election finance reform. And we did in the state of Washington. And so I'm here to tell you guys that, this was a district which was, the last senator was a Republican. And what really helped was the fact that I was someone who worked in the community, I was known in the community, and so when I decided to run for office, I had the PTSA parents up in supporting me. I had the domestic violence community supporting me. I had defense attorneys and prosecutors supporting me. I had law enforcement supporting me because I was one of the trainers at the Criminal Justice Training Academy. And so I had the Indians who actually got motivated in our areas supporting me. And so this broad coalition came together because I think people do want someone who reflects them, who works hard, wants to do the right thing, and is interested in uplifting everyone. And so I truly, honestly do believe that when democracy is awakened, justice wins. And I've seen that over and over again. And so I'm really excited for this conversation. And there's so much more I can talk about activating the Indian community to get politically active. And I know my mom just logged in, so I'm saying, hi, Mom. I'm glad you're watching as well.
It's wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing your story, Senator Dhingra. Senator Hashmi.
Thank you so much, Mansi, and thank you to all the organizers for this event. And I can't tell you how much Senator Dhingra's story is resonating with me, because I feel like my journey has been very, very similar. Just to give a little bit of background about myself, I did come to the States when I was 4 years old, and my dad was a college professor in a small town in Georgia. So I grew up in Georgia. I'm a child of the South, and I really feel like that connection to the stories of the South and to the issues that have always impacted our Southern communities was very much a part of my story as well. But as you mentioned in the introduction, it was my 50th year of arrival, 2019, that I decided to run for office. And I thought that was an appropriate time to do that. Prior to my political engagement, I was just a mild-mannered English professor at a community college. But if you know English professors, you know there's nothing mild-mannered really about us. We can be a fairly involved bunch of folks. We read literature that can be controversial and challenge us to think about our issues deeply. But I've been teaching for 30 years, and my motivation was twofold. First of all, ever since 2008, really, I'd seen tremendous economic disparities happening across my state. A lot of my students were struggling with housing instability, food insecurity, and the cost of tuition was rising dramatically. And the reason for that was that state government was pulling funding away from our colleges and universities and imposing this huge burden on the backs of middle class and low income students. As you well know, student loan debt has just skyrocketed in this country. So that was a catalyst for my political engagement, because I knew we could do things better at the state level. But the second major catalyst was really, again, as Senator Dhingra just stated, the election of Donald Trump. I never in my wildest dreams thought that this country would elect a man as incompetent and as profoundly unworthy of the office of the presidency. And to see that happen in this country was to see it as a rebuke of everything that I value and that so many of my friends and neighbors and colleagues value. And I knew that we had to respond in some fashion. So when he was elected in 2016, my first impulse as an academic was to hold conferences. I started to organize conferences, especially around the issue of what it meant to be Muslim in America, because one of his first actions, as you know, was to impose the Muslim ban. And I felt that if I'd lived here for 50 years, why am I being told that I'm somehow not American enough? Why are my friends and family being told that we don't belong in this country? So I organized conferences, we established discussions, we would get 300 to 400 people in a room packed just to talk about these concerns. And it was just a diverse audience. And just seeing that momentum made me realize that there's so many people who are rejecting the fallacy and the presumptions of this particular president, and they want to see an action. And so I started to prepare to run in 2018 and really launched immediately after the November 2018 elections. And Virginia has been seeing a tidal wave, really, of red seats flipping blue. We started that momentum in 2017. It continued with 3 congressional seats in 2018. And just like Senator Dhingra, my seat had been a Republican-held seat for the past 40 years. And flipping this seat blue gave us the majority in the Senate. So being able to turn a predominantly Republican district to the control of the Democrats has been a powerful signal throughout not just the state, but throughout the country. Right after my election, I got so many emails and phone calls and people using one word, and that was the word hope. That if we could do this, not just in Virginia, but in central Virginia, which, as you know, Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy, if we could elect a South Asian Muslim woman to the Virginia Senate, that was a sign of hope that this country is far more inclusive and far more ready for the kind of values we all cherish, and that we're going to continue this momentum then in 2020.
It's wonderful. And thank you. Thank you for sharing your story and what that means for what flipping that seat means. That's really amazing. And last but not least, we have Representative Padma Kuppa from Michigan.
Thank you so much, Mansi, and thank you to Sanjeev and Anjali and all the others at Indians for Biden. And I'm really excited to be on the panel with these 3 wonderful state senators. Each of them is inspiring for me. And hearing their story, I feel the common threads. Like Jay, I've always been involved in the community, had always been engaged in what they were doing at the state government. Used to go up to Lansing as an engineer to go complain, as a member of the PTA, to go complain about what my state rep and my state senator were doing, cutting education funding when my kids were growing up. But my story actually also starts in the United States at the age of 4, when my parents brought me here, just like Senator Hashmi's. And however, my parents did something different. They decided they wanted to serve their country, and they moved back to India with me and my 1-year-old brother. I was just about to turn 16, and this was pre-internet, and I was not happy about moving to India at all. So I basically decided I loved math, and you had 2 options if you wanted to come back to America, according to my mom. You either became a doctor or an engineer, because America needs doctors and engineers. And so I loved math, and so I came back as an engineer, had studied at NIT Rungle, and I never thought of politics as a profession. It was completely just, I voted. And then I came and I saw things in graduate school that I wanted to change. I'd always been an activist, even in college, in undergraduate days. And so when I came to grad school, I became the vice president of the Society of Women Engineers, was involved in when we moved to Michigan after I got married and had children, was involved in the local community activities. And people would say to me, Padma, why don't you run for something? And I'd be like, no, I don't like politics. It's binary. And especially after I started the Interfaith Organization, I mean, my middle name was pluralism, and I was all about pluralism and peace and bringing people together. And so in 2016, I saw the signs. I mean, Michigan, and my daughter's at Ohio State, and I've driven through Ohio and really realized that it wasn't going to be easy. And I didn't stay up late on election night because I kind of knew already. I went to bed at 10 o'clock. And I kind of knew that we had a lot more to do at the grassroots level and that we were going to have some difficult years ahead. But it wasn't until the confirmation of Betsy DeVos, as I would go home from work and watch the hearings and then go home, go to bed and cry. Why, you know, I'm over 50, why am I crying? Why don't I do something about it? My dad always said all politics is local. And so this was not our gift to the world, should not be Betsy DeVos, but the opposite, which is to fix public education. And so I decided that I would run. Several people had encouraged me to run for state rep prior to me running, and one of them was Rashida Tlaib. She had been a former state rep, and then Stephanie Chang, who's now currently a state senator, and Christine Gregg, who's my current caucus leader, and all three of them embraced the idea that I was going to run, and especially Leader Gregg and Stephanie Chang, both, you know, just pulled me in and gave me so much support. And so I think the idea that you can do it is something that everyone believed that I could do it. And it was just amazing to see the amount of community support that came out when I decided I was going to run. We estimated about 40 people on January 1st when I launched my campaign, and we filled the place. It was almost 100 people. And the guy who was the restaurant owner was like struggling because we didn't have enough food. So it was really nice, the journey into this space. And I always tell people, I'm not a politician. I'm a public servant. I'm a representative. And I may not know all the answers, but I'm going to find them for you. You know, problem solving is a thing that you learn as an engineer. And so I just brought that with me into the legislative system.
Wonderful, wonderful. I mean, it's such an incredible story, especially when you hear someone from a different backgrounds who enter public service and then politics. And so, I just want to thank you all for sharing, you know, your very different stories and you know, your personal inspiration for public service and entering politics, and hopefully it inspires more of our community to run and serve. Our team also wanted to ask all of you just to share a little bit, just very quickly, a little bit about the demographics of your district and whether it is, you know, kind of fairly evenly split between Democrats or Republicans, and you know, given how your district is it a challenge, you know, to appeal to more moderate voters in your district while keeping liberal voters engaged? How do you go about doing that? And Senator Chaudhuri, if you want to begin again, that would be great.
Sure, Mansi. And I'll say a couple of things, and I won't speak too long because I think actually the other three legislators actually are in very moderate competitive districts, as we've heard. And, you know, we should also hear from them the amount of money that was spent to flip these seats, because it's really incredible. I mean, I've followed a lot of these races closely. I mean, unlike the other legislators on here, I mean, my district is relatively Democratic. I mean, the downside for me is that we are the epicenter of redistricting litigation. So I have represented 3 different state Senate districts in the last 4 years. My original state Senate district that I started actually was a Democratic district and had a fairly significant South Asian population that included the town of Morrisville that was 40% South Asian. And so part of the reason when I first ran is my argument was that my district was kind of old North Carolina, which is where my family lives, and it was new North Carolina. And so I had a foot in both districts, but then my district after that became significantly African-American. It was almost 25 to 30% African-American. And my new district that I'm on the ballot for this year is almost 75% Caucasian. And so I've said I've gone from, you know, Hindu temples to black churches to white churches all in 4 years. Most of what I focus on really are around progressive issues. I mean, I will quickly say that my philosophy has been that on issues that are progressive and important to me, I will stand my ground, but where I can find common ground across the aisle, I've been able to do so. And those have been issues around protecting children from sexual predators. I've worked on bipartisan work around that, similar to Senator Dhingra here on the call. I've worked on computer science education has been another area that I've been able to find common ground. I've also been able to find common ground on setting up a registry, an Alzheimer's disease registry for our state as well. So there are opportunities to work across the aisle too.
Wonderful. Senator Dhingra?
Thank you. So I have been called the $10 million senator because $10 million was spent on my race, $3 million in attack ads. And let me tell you, that's not the most fun, especially when you're married to a turban sick man. So, and we're fortunate. We have a lot of family, and I will say our family made sure they came, visited us, stayed with us, helped us out. And it's very hard to do this without family to help support you. But my district is really interesting. It's parts of Woodinville, which is like the wine that, Washington wine area. Redmond, which is where you have Microsoft at. Kirkland is where Costco, right? Costco signatures, Kirkland signatures from Costco. And Sammamish and Duval, which are very suburban areas. The voters are 80% white. But the population is very diverse. We have a lot of Indians. We have a lot of Chinese, but they're not citizens, so they can't vote. So it's really interesting when you parse out who are the people who can actually vote versus who's living in the district. So when you come to the district, it looks fairly diverse, but the voters aren't. And so, I would say you can normally break any of these purple districts down as 30% good Democrats, 30% good Republicans. And you're really taking a look at the 40% in the middle. And the 40% in the middle here are actually independents. So it is a affluent district. It is a very highly educated district. And that is what was very helpful in our race, because a lot of the negative ads that came out, people could see through them. It was an educated district where people, I insisted that in all of my material, we had a family photo. And we had to have this conversation when we decided to run, when my husband said, hey, if you don't want my photo in your material, like, it's okay, let's have a plan around it. And I said, no, I am very proud of being a Sikh woman and of our family, and the whole family is going to be represented because that's what's done in politics. And, because of the educated population, they were able to identify us as Sikhs. So while we did have 3 million in attack ads, that is what really helped. And, the conversation I always had with people is, we as human beings, what do we want? We want to leave the world better for our children than we found it. And that is something that resonates with people across the political spectrum. We want a better life for our children. And so when I take a look at the work that I've been doing, I have children in public school, and I was very involved there. And I take a look at the criminal justice system, and I say, if we really want to solve the issues in the criminal justice system, it starts with our children. Let's make sure we can provide wraparound services, trauma-informed care, take a look at adverse childhood experiences, and have children leave high school with a plan for the future. And we know that if you simply get kids to graduate with that high school degree, their involvement in the criminal justice system plummets. So let's focus on our kids. And the second was also behavioral health, mental illness and substance use disorder. I've spent a lot of my life working in that field. And these two are issues that resonate with anyone, because, what impacts us on a daily basis is really our everyday life, and making sure we're in a position where we're happy and our children are happy. And so for this district, I think my background, the fact that my husband is an engineer, that I've done so much work in the area of basically helping and uplifting individuals, is what really helped. And that is what helped us overcome all the money that came in on this race.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, it's nice to know that hearing your story about how you won with so much money spent on attack ads. So that's wonderful. Senator Hashmi, do you want to share a little bit about your district and ways that you found to engage different types of voters?
Sure. As I mentioned, this was a Republican district for several decades, and I was facing a Republican incumbent. So there were some challenges certainly in place. My district is unique. It is Central Virginia, so it covers a good part of the city of Richmond. But it also covers a good part of Chesterfield County, and that is the suburb of Richmond. And then a adjacent rural county, Powhatan. So I have both the rural, the suburban, and the urban, and they're very, very different communities. I don't have that many South Asians or immigrants in my particular district. Most of our South Asian and immigrant population lives just north of my district or just to the south. My demographics are largely split across African American and Caucasian lines. So about 65% Caucasian and another 38 or so that are African American. And to really appeal to this broad demographic and this diversity of communities, I focused my message very squarely on the issues that matter to everybody. They're not red issues or blue issues, they're matters that affect families. And these are issues about education, healthcare, access to higher education, and community safety. So these were concerns that really resonated with many, many people. My race did cost a lot of money. I had to raise about $2.5 million myself, and my opponent spent the same amount of money. And just like Senator Dhingra, we confronted some negative attack ads, some degree of Islamophobia. But one thing that I learned is that I had many folks who had always voted Republican, but they came to me and said, we're voting for you, because they, first of all, were offended by the attack ads. And secondly, they knew me and they knew my husband, or they knew our daughters. We had lived in the district for 30 years. Both of my daughters had grown up here, gone to school here. I'd been heavily involved in volunteer activities. I've taught myself at least 4,000 to 5,000 students in this area. My husband has a wide assortment of friends here. We have neighbors, and we've been spending 30 years just getting to know people in this community. So what folks were seeing in the attack ads did not resonate with the person that they knew. And so they were offended by that. And we had a lot of folks who voted as a result of that negativity. So I think anytime anyone runs for office, that need for genuine concern, empathy, and connection to the voters is essential. And if that comes across, it really doesn't matter whether you're running as a Republican, Democrat, Independent. People are looking for authenticity, and that comes across in candidates.
Definitely, definitely. And thank you for sharing more about your race. Representative Kuppa, do you want to talk a little bit about your district and its constituents?
Sure. So I live in a district that I represent about 100,000 people, roughly, almost. I represent 2 cities in southeastern Michigan. As you all know, this is a great way to show Michigan. And the cities of Troy and Clawson. I live in Troy. Clawson is what I call the Main Street and the small business. It's a more intimate community. It's about 15% of my constituents are there. And Troy is a wide range of immigrant populations, but still the majority voters are still mainstream Americans. There are a lot of Indians who are here on temporary visas. So it looks like we have more Indian voters than we actually do. But the race itself was really based on shared values. It was based on all the things I had done, whether it was in the PTA or on the Planning Commission. People trusted me for representing our shared values. And we had a lot of things that people have heard headlines around the country about what happened in Flint, about our water being contaminated. That was an issue. There was also issues around the environment. We have the world's largest freshwater ecosystem here, and it is the basis for our tourism industry. The Great Lakes are amazing. I mean, it's one of the reasons I stayed when I came here. And so making sure that we protect these things is more important to people than whether you have an R or a D next to your name.
Right. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you for sharing as well. And thank you to all of you for sharing a little bit about your districts and your races in particular, and how you were able to overcome the odds and kind of run and serve. And again, we hope that more people come and vote in this election, knowing that they have the opportunity, or their kids will have the opportunity, or their grandchildren to run for office and serve, just like all of you are doing. Our team did have a question that we wanted to ask you, because we're lucky to have so many different faiths represented as part of this discussion. And first, I know Representative Kuppa, you were one of the first Hindus to serve in your state legislature. Senator Hashmi is one of the first Muslim women to serve in the Virginia Senate, and Senator Dhingra is one of the first Sikhs to serve in any state legislatures. And so, we just wanted to ask all of you if you could just speak very briefly on how your faith has informed your leadership style and how you lead. And please go ahead, Representative Kuppa.
Sure. I actually wrote a piece for American Kahani recently in support of Vice President Biden, because I think faith is at the root of my activism. I've always been an activist because I always wanted to do the right thing. For me, dharma, which is the core tenet that we start off with, we have dharma, dharmartha, kama, moksha, we say, as the fourfold pursuits. And before everything else, before you acquire wealth, before you fulfill desire or ambition, and before you seek moksha, which is, I think, a common theme in most religions, to seek that ultimate goal with God, the first thing you have to do is follow dharma, which is justice, to fix the world, as my Jewish friends would say, to repair the world. And for me, it was always, you see a problem, you go do something to fix it. And
Right.
So that was always at the root of why I volunteered in different ways. And
Right.
And I think that still remains. My first bill was one that my predecessor actually introduced. It was to close a loophole in the law about online sexual predators and vulnerable adults, because we have a lot of laws on the books that protect children, but nothing that protects a vulnerable adult, somebody with Down syndrome or autism or something like that. And so just making sure that we're doing the right thing.
Right. Yep. Senator Hashmi, do you want to speak for just a minute or so? Or we had a lot of questions that we're trying to get to, but we wanted to make sure that we address this one, just because we're so lucky to have so much representation as part of this panel. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I'll keep my comments brief, but certainly my faith was an important impetus for me to run. Islam itself was born out of the need for social justice. It's been a very important part of the faith itself, and certainly my faith. One of my favorite tenets of Islam is the idea that there is absolute equality across all people and all genders. Men and women are equal in the eyes of the Creator, and the sense that there is no distinction among races, among nationalities or ethnicities, that's very much inscribed in the tenets of Islam. There's no difference between the rich and the poor. Everyone has an equal obligation within the faith. And so when I think about the issues of social justice and the transformation of societies through that vision of equality that is very much grounded in my faith tradition.
Wonderful, thank you. Senator Dhingra?
Thank you. I grew up in a family where we talked a lot about honesty, equality, humility, and seva to the community, all the things that are so important to the Sikh community. Both my grandmothers, my Dadi used to regularly feed all the orphans in her neighborhood on a regular basis. My Nani volunteered at multiple nonprofits her entire life. My Mansi, my mom, have done that as well in Texas and California. And so that seva to the community, to give back, and to really make sure we're standing up to the values of honesty and equality and humility have driven a lot of the work that I do and continue to do.
Beautiful. And Senator Chaudhuri, did you want to add anything about how your faith has informed your leadership?
Faith is very important to me in my family, and I think when I think about Hinduism, I think about it being a faith that just as other faiths in the world, and from what we've heard today, is one that celebrates diversity, that doesn't distinguish between rich and poor, that believes in this idea of unity. And I think having that foundational kind of underpinning, I think in many ways allows me to be more open-minded about diverse arguments that may exist with the other side. But I also think it also sets out a vision for what I think we all want to achieve in the world, and that's to find that our greatest strength comes from the diversity of faiths and races and ethnicity.
Wonderful. So we wanted to leave some time for Q&A, but just to end with, we wanted to ask if each of you could just talk about 1 minute, basically about, since 2016, we found that several, important issues. I think a lot of people have found out that it's actually the state legislature that a lot of issues are decided. And we wanted to ask if there's a couple of issues that you think are at stake in this election in particular. And what do you hope will be a motivating factor for, our community to come out and vote? If you could just, and sorry, we're so crunched for time, but if you could just give, 1 minute kind of a response for this, if possible, starting with you, Senator Chaudhuri. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. So look, in North Carolina and Senator Hashmi, what happened in Virginia is kind of the blueprint for us, but I will cite 3 things. In North Carolina, we are one of only 12 states to not have expanded Medicaid. And so Medicaid expansion means that we could cover 500,000 North Carolinians. For having so many members in the medical profession that are in our community, we should all be in support of Medicaid expansion. Secondly, we put a premium on education. We have not increased teacher pay to the median national or to the national average where we should be. So I think like on healthcare and education, those are incredibly important issues, and those are issues that are frankly made at the state level.
Wonderful. Senator Hashmi, do you want to talk about just very quickly, 1 or 2 issues that you think are crucial for our community to come out and vote on?
Absolutely. As Senator Chaudhuri was just saying, so many of these concerns are right at the state level, and redistricting is going to be essential for all of our states as we complete our 2020 census and the districts are drawn. If they're not drawn fairly, yet again, we're going to see a continuing cycle of disenfranchisement of so many individuals in our communities. So having fair and effective legislators at the state level is absolutely essential, because that impacts our national level politics. And what it means to have a Biden presidency versus a Trump presidency in the next 4 years is going to be everything for our children and grandchildren. The environmental crisis is at hand. We see that in the burning of California and the flooding and the hurricanes. So if you care about your children's future, you have to care about the environment. And that is squarely in the hands of a Biden presidency. There is so much more, but I'm going to stop right there.
Thank you. Thank you. Senator Dhingra, and then Representative Kuppa.
Thank you for that. You know, states really are the ones that can make sure that regardless of what's going on at the federal level, people's and individuals' rights are being protected. That was a huge component of what Washington did right after my election when we had the trifecta. So we had a Democratic governor, Democratic Senate by one majority, and the House. And it was just about making sure we're protecting the rights of individuals. And I have to say the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg at the Supreme Court should scare all of us, especially us women, as to what the future holds in terms of access to healthcare. This race is so crucial at the national level as well as the state levels, because everything that our parents, our grandparents, we moved to this country for is at stake. Education, access to healthcare, our environment, and frankly, women's rights. So I cannot stress how important it is for everyone to get registered to vote and then go out and vote.
I will say that the ACA could be overturned, right? And so we want to make sure in Michigan that we protect the ACA. We have legislation in the hopper, but of course we don't have, we have a divided government. We have both our chambers are controlled by the Republicans. And so we are hopeful that this time we will at least flip the House. And we also have an independent redistricting commission. We voted to change our constitution so that we have an independent redistricting commission to redraw our districts, because our districts are one of the most gerrymandered in the country. And so making sure that we have fair elections and that we have fair districts where voters are the ones that choose the politicians and not the other way around.
Right.
But there's just, as everyone has said, there's a myriad of issues that are going to be affected. And I would say that for all of those shared values, we really need to see a Biden presidency.
Wonderful. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. We have, I'm going to turn it over to one of my volunteer colleagues, Anjali, who's been really active in politics. As the president of New Jersey Now, which works on gender-based and race-based violence. And I want to thank you all for sharing with us your stories, telling us about your districts, telling us about your faith. And these issues that are of such critical importance in this election. And I also just wanted to share, call your attention to the chat group and opportunities to really come out and mobilize our community to vote. We're partnering with South Asians for Biden for phone banking from this weekend until election. And so there's opportunities to call Desi voters in battleground states every weekend, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. So we really hope that you will, just sign up for as many sessions as possible, but at least one, and really have a chance to connect directly with voters in these states that are so critical to the presidential election. And Anjali, over to you.
Thank you, Mansi. So those are really great questions, and I have to tell you all that listening to you, I feel very inspired, and I'm sure all our audience members do. As immigrants, there were so many parts of your story that sort of really resonated with me, whether it was from education or, just growing up and your values and how that shaped your political career. So as Mansi mentioned, I am president of New Jersey Now. So as you know, Now works on women's issues, which include pretty much everything these days, right? But the other thing that I am really passionate about is getting more South Asians engaged in politics. And what that means is that I ran for council for my local town in 2018. And I saw my running mate, who was an Hispanic, she sent one email out and she would get donations. And we just don't get that level of engagement with South Asians. And I'm talking in New Jersey, where we have a really high percentage of South Asians. So my question to all of you is, how do we get, sort of our Indians, our South Asians really getting to the point where they understand the value of being at the table and building that political capital.
Anjali, can I go first? And then if you all don't mind, I've got to hop off in a couple of minutes, but this is such a great question. And I think you're going to hear this reflected from the other legislators here. And it's something that I've said before. Again, I will tell you, I've kind of witnessed this already with a lot of the support that is going on with the U.S. Senate races and the national race. And again, like it doesn't need to be either or, it needs to be both. But again, like my point is when something happens in the community, the first call that people make is not to the U.S. senator. It's actually to the members. It's to the panelists here, and it's especially to local council races. And so, you know, I feel like I've got a pretty good track record with our community, but I think we have to do a lot more to educate our community that the real differences that are impacting their lives. I mean, we can hear countless constituent stories of what folks here on this call have done, but at the same time, that dollar that they make as a contribution can go so much further in a state legislative race to get more South Asians elected to the legislature than the amount of money that we spend trying to send members to Congress or to the U.S. Senate. And I think if we want to look at return on investment, since we're very business minded, I would say that the single best return on investment are the women that we have here on this call tonight.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jay. That was really sweet.
And I am proud to say that in each of your communities, if you want me to say that, because this is my passion.
So I'll just add to that. You know, when I ran, I had a few people, there were a few South Asians who had run for different offices before me, who told me, they said, you know, don't have any expectations of the Indian community because they really weren't involved in my race. And I remember thinking, like, that's so strange. And that was not my experience. I think a lot of it had to do with the timing of my race. It had to do with the fact that, you know, I was one of the founders of Chaya, you know, 20 years ago before I ran. And so I was known in the community. My husband was known in the community. And one of the things that I did was actually I had a teen campaign committee. And let me tell you, that teen campaign committee, we had Indian kids of all ages be a part of it. And for them, you know, I think it was just like, well, yes, you know, it looks great on my resume, let's do it. But what ended up happening is their parents got engaged. And we used to do house parties. I said, any one of you who wants me to show up at your house and call your friends and neighbors and let's just talk. That's what we did. Mm-hmm. And I saw amazing engagement from the Indians. It kind of ballooned after that. We now have a South Asian PAC in the state of Washington. We had our Indian Association of Western Washington. One of the executive directors is on the call here too. Hi, Lalita. They started doing a candidates forum. And so it really helped mobilize the entire community. And, you know, the issues that we deal with impact the Indian community, especially when it comes to immigration. And, you know, you hear stories and stories about children who come here, like so many of us, at the age of 3, and now they're 18, and guess what? They no longer have status because their parents didn't end up getting green cards, because now it's taking 80 years for someone to get a green card. And so who do they call? They call us, because we understand what they're going through and what it means for someone to have grown here their entire life, but at 18, have to get a foreign student visa to attend the college with all their classmates or be deported. I mean, these are hard times, and representation matters. We need people who look like us in the halls of power.
Yep.
I want to just also say something like Manka. I also had this experience because I'd been involved in the Troy Telugu Association, the Great Lakes Aradhana Committee, the interfaith, the temple, nationally with the Hindu Mandir Executives Conference and the Hindu American Foundation. I called friends all over. I called my college friends, and I had built a Rolodex over 20 years plus of working in Michigan. So I called everyone there because, again, you're not asking to give money to a Republican or a Democrat. You're really asking, can you invest in our shared values? and being able to ask. And because I'd done so much of nonprofit fundraising, I just transitioned that. And a lot of it is political giving is something new to our community, but giving is not new.
Right.
And I think being able to translate that political giving is a way to represent your values. People are used to giving to Aim for Seva or to some other, or to temple, or to some other charitable cause, and to women's organizations like Chaya and Haven or whatever, but getting them to give it so that you elect people. And I think it's important that we give not only to South Asian candidates, but to candidates across whoever they are, representing our values, whether it's a city council member or a school board member, all the way to the national level, and understand what that race will take. And I was very fortunate that I had before me Indian immigrant, son of Indian immigrants, Sam Singh, who was a Democratic leader. He was the mayor of Okemos when he first started out, and then he became a state Democratic caucus leader. And he told me, you need to raise $250,000. He said, some people will invest their own money, others will ask. And he said, start asking. And that's what I did. And, you get turned down. But then eventually somebody wrote me a $50 check and said, you're a Democrat, I only like Republicans, but I'm giving you $50 anyway. I took it. You know what? Money is given with goodwill and trust. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to represent the values that we share.
I'll just share that my experience, I think, is different from the other three panelists. I really did not have very strong connections to the South Asian community here in Central Virginia. And being both Indian and Pakistani, my dad is Pakistani, I felt like I had a foot in both worlds, but a foot in neither world as well. And so I really had to work hard to establish some of those connections as I was running. And a lot of people felt resentful. They said, you've been here for 30 years and yet you've never been a part of our community. And my response is that I associate with friends that I work with and my neighbors. And so that has been my social circle. But I think you're absolutely right that we have an absolute need to change this conversation about why it's important to donate. In a race such as mine or any other race that requires millions of dollars to run, we are judged as candidates initially by how much money we can raise. So if we can get across that initial hurdle of raising money in that first quarter, which is so critical, then we are demonstrating our political viability. And our communities just need to understand that we have to be able to support candidates up and down who reflect our values. And local and state races, as Senator Chaudhuri said, they may not be as sexy as national level races, but they are the most essential. And understanding that political process is so important for all of our communities.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting to me to hear all the different perspectives. And I think also, we also notice a lot of apathy amongst our Indian voters. So our last question, I think we're kind of running a little long, would be, how do we really motivate our Indian voters to go out there and vote? Really, our numbers are very dismal in terms of voter turnout. And I mean, if this election is not going to do it, I don't know when it will, but I think that's really important. What's the message for people to go out and vote for, whether it's a local election or the Biden team?
I'll just start and say, the issues that we deal with in our daily lives are impacted by what's going on at the national level. This was not necessarily true 10, 15 years ago. Many people call us a model minority. We kept our heads down. We went to work. We made our money. We are the most affluent group in the United States, though we do have poverty within the ranks of Indians, but overall, we are the most affluent groups. And we always thought, you keep your head down, work hard, you'll be fine. That is no longer the case. We have people who work hard, and they don't get their green card. You know, my mom got her green card in 5 years, became a citizen in, quickly. Like, that does not happen anymore. Why do people come here? We come here because we want our kids to have that opportunity that doesn't exist in so many other countries. And if we don't vote, we are losing those opportunities. We are losing the ability to leave this world better than we found it. And the stakes are just so high when it comes to our daily lives that we simply have to get up. And don't run for office if you don't want to, but please just vote. And it really is coming down to that, where our day-to-day lives are being impacted by what's going on at the national level and what's going on at the state level.
And I'll just echo the harsh reality is I have no understanding of why anybody would be voting for Donald Trump out of our South Asian communities. This administration has just done everything it can to demonize immigrants, to demonize brown people, to demonize anyone of a different faith tradition. And this is not the America that our parents came to or that we envisioned for ourselves and our children. And if we want to see a restoration of those values and those ideals that not just we cherish, but so many people around the world cherish, we have to be active, engaged, and we have to start demanding the kind of society that we expect out of the democracy. So not being politically engaged, not voting at any level is costing us dearly. And I would certainly encourage everyone who values those essential elements of democratic principles to be as fully committed as they possibly can, especially this year.
Representative Kuppa, do you want to?
I was going to say, Gandhi, I think, to paraphrase something Gandhi said, democracy is what gives the weak the same strength of voice as the strong, gives the weak also a voice. And I think that when you're a minority, your voice, or especially as a woman, you don't see yourselves reflected in the halls of power. And so if we want our values to be represented, we need to be involved. We need to participate. It's not a spectator sport, right? Democracy is very much one that requires not only voting, but also advocating. Even I tell the high schoolers that come volunteer or that come ask me, find an issue that you're really passionate about and volunteer for it. If it's the environment, go find the local Sierra Club or the local League of Conservation Voters. Go get involved in something that you care about at the local level. And from there, you'll figure out how you get into political office if that is what you want to do. But you don't have to be in office to be involved in in democracy. I mean, that's, to me, is one of the most important things. This is a very risky job. I mean, every few years you have to run for office again. I think that being involved in the political process is critical for us to stay engaged in this world.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all of you. And thank you for staying, even though we ran over. And I'm just going to turn it over to Mansi.
Oh, thank you. I mean, thank you all for joining. This has been a really inspiring discussion, and I hope our community signs up to phone bank, to organize, to really come out and make a difference. I know, personally speaking, that you guys are all a testament to what women in our community can do, and we're really thankful that you were able to join tonight.
Can I just say one last thing to everyone that joined and everyone who watches this, wherever you put this out? Volunteers are the lifeblood of a campaign. And we run a campaign based on metrics. How many direct voter contacts did we make every day? And so if everyone could volunteer a few hours these next few weeks, it will make such a difference, because people are already voting in Michigan. We started getting our absentee ballots out, and we need everyone, all hands on deck. And so if people can volunteer, whether it's in a local race or whether it's in the Biden race, to make sure that people have a plan to vote, because when people are more intentional about voting, you know they're going to do it. So really, truly, that's my big request is volunteer, volunteer, volunteer for the next 37 days.
Well said, well said. And thank you all for joining us on a Saturday evening. Thank you to all of these amazing speakers. Thank you to all of the people who joined and listened into the conversation. Please sign up to volunteer through Indians for Biden National Council. We also have a weekly newsletter. And of course, please sign up to phone bank and call voters in battleground states. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your weekend. Bye-bye.